What if I told you that failing companies or losing companies or organizations make continuously make poor decisions? And I mean continuously. Like every decision they make is a bad one, which is why they fail. Now, got quite a few of them to roll through here today, so stick with me. But in any case, I'm going to start with the sport of bowling. And this started with a conversation I actually had with a local proprietor or bowling center owner here in Minnesota. Now, the PWBA is the Women's Professional Bowling Tour. This organization, I mean, people don't ever really think about bowling at all, which is part of the problem. But how this organization has gone about trying to do it is where the bad decisions come stepping in. If you're already behind the eight ball and you make a whole bunch of bad decisions, you tend to stay behind the eight ball. And so the PWBA tour had a regular tour stop here in the Twin Cities called the Twin Cities Open that ran for several years and did so successfully. For the sport of bowling, the Midwest is probably really the core market for the sport. It always has been. And part of the problem is that this sport and the organizations that run it try to hide from that. And the result is they had a successful run here until 2024. And that was the last Twin Cities Open. I just got a message from their proprietor this morning that they won't even return, the PWBA won't even return their phone calls, and they can't even call or email them at all if they're trying to host another, in the sake of hosting the tournament again in the future. Now, the problem is, like I said, this is a core market for bowling. The Midwest, from here running all the way east to Michigan and Ohio, have always been so. It's the heartland of the sport. The sports headquarters were in the Milwaukee area for decades. For decades, it was headquartered. Everything was headquartered in the Milwaukee suburb of Glendale. So, this is a sport that has made a bad decision to basically dump one of its core markets, and they have never and they do continue to really return to a couple of those key markets, but they don't come back to anywhere else. And so they have decided, they regularly return to Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is a good idea, and they regularly return to Rockford, Illinois, which is a bad idea. Rockford is an economically depressed city. It doesn't have much to offer, and the thing that I have noticed about bowling is that bowling has never had any external sponsors outside of the sport itself, which is a problem. Because if it's an internal economy and it doesn't attract and grow, there's not really a future for it, and they're making short-sighted right now decisions. Speaking of short-sighted right now decisions, then we got the men's tour, which is owned by Bowlero. Bowlero is the Walmart of bowling. They are the big mega conglomerate. There's only about 4,000 bowling centers left in the United States, which is down from a high of 10,000. Out of those 4,000, Bowlero owns 2,800 of them. So what you got is a big company that owns the men's tour, which, by the way, is stopping here in Minnesota this week and weekend. But here's how short-sighted they are. Bowlero is only interested in the TV telecast, which, by the way, have no national sponsors. So fans are banned from watching most of the event. The only exception will be the TV finals. And it's the World Series of Bowling, so several tournaments in one location. So there's going to be more than one finals that fans can attend, but they can't attend any of the events before then, which is short-sighted because you're cutting off the growth of the sport at the knees. Sticking within the sport of bowling, you've got the whole mess that is the USBC, which is the sanctioning organization. My center does not have any sanctioned leagues anymore. They made a conscious decision several years ago to not have sanctioned leagues because they got tired of the rules changes, the oil pattern changes, and the absolute circus that was around those things. They initially had an oil standard and then dumped it. It's too easy these days for people to bowl 300. The number of those has exploded, which is actually ruining the sport. So a lot of short-sighted decisions go into, which are short-term money grabs that hurt the sport. Bowling was in its heyday when it had a national sponsor. The PBA Tour had a national sponsor for its season-ending championship tournament. It was called the Firestone Tournament of Champions. Firestone, of course, being the famous tire company. The Firestone Tournament of Champions was a huge sponsorship that provided, in many of the years that it ran, a 6-figure prize money for the tournament winner, $100,000+. Because they had the sponsorship money, they had the TV audience. I mean, many people, many millions of people watched bowling on Saturday afternoons, myself included. It's what helped draw me into the sport to begin with. They don't have this anymore. They have short-sighted people running the sport for a short-term money grab. Now I'm going to move on to another short-term money grab real quick, and I'm going to go into the world of college basketball. This is the story of a conference called the Southland Conference, which is a very low-level Division I basketball conference in the NCAA. Name a school within the Southland Conference, I dare you. Well, you really can't, but you've heard of one. You just don't associate him with the conference because that school is Stephen F. Austin, which is a school in Nacogdoches, Texas. They are famous for having pulled off several upsets in the NCAA tournament in the early rounds using the automatic qualifier that they got from the Southland Conference. The Southland Conference used to have its conference championship tournament in Katy, Texas, at the Merrill Center, which is an arena of about 8,000 to 9,000 capacity. Now, anybody's idea of a large arena, it was built basically for the Katy ISD schools with them in mind. Big basketball games do occur within that district, and so 8,000 to 9,000 is a big high school basketball game, by the way, much bigger than your typical high school gym. So the Merrill Center was built for that purpose. It was built to even allow for telecasts and televised games and televised events. It's technologically wired for that. The Merrill Center was the Southland Conference's basketball championship host site for about 20 years. Fantastic venue, fantastic exposure for the city of Katy and the greater Katy region. They could at least make the crowds look like a crowd. You know, if you don't have a big arena of 20,000. An arena of about half that size can be made to look fuller than it really is. Which, for the sake of ESPN, which did televise the championship games, by the way, ESPN did the championship games for the Southland Conference tournament out of Katy. And by all intents, it was a good thing. The best part about Katy is that players in college, of course, even in the NIL era, they largely are not of drinking age. But the players had lots to do in this city. Lots to do. Katy is built with youth and children in mind. they could attend the games and learn and enjoy the sport. And in turn, the athletes and the players could go to Top Golf. They could go to Home Run Dugout, which is a virtual reality and a real batting cage as well. They could go to Andretti, the indoor go-karting complex. 3-level go-kart tracks. And of course, the city has phenomenal restaurants and eating. There could be an entirely different video about how that came to be, how Katy became one of the top 20 food cities in the nation, despite not being a mega metropolis of any size. The greater Katy region has a population of about 500,000. So it punches way above its weight in this regard. You can eat well there. You can play well there. There are so many amenities in this place for athletes who are under the age of 21 to enjoy, which highlights the mistake and the terrible decision that the Southland Conference made. The Southland Conference has a school called McNeese State, which is in Lake Charles, Louisiana, about 2.5 hours east of Katy, Texas. Now, Lake Charles is a small city in southwest Louisiana. Really, the only real entertainment option in Lake Charles is the Harrah's Casino. Athletes who go for the conference tournament there, they don't have much to do. And the fan base does not really exist there. They don't have the youth fan base to draw in to expand the game of basketball. But the reason why they made the move is because McNeese State threatened to leave the conference. Very short-sighted decision. You abandon a conference tournament home that served you extremely well for 20 plus years, and you move to Placate, a school that doesn't really mean much to the conference. Meanwhile, noticing all of this is a school that they really could not afford to lose, and that is Oral Roberts. They're watching this happen, and they're wondering who's running this clown show. And Oral Roberts, they left the conference. They headed back for the Mid-Continent Conference, which is now called the it was formerly the Mid-Continent Conference when they were a part of it. It is now the Summit League. That is where you will find Oral Roberts to this day, which plays its conference tournaments a long ways from Tulsa, but in a much friendlier place for the athletes and in a much more, a friendlier city, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, is where the Summit League has its championships. Oral Roberts opted out of an easy league for a much tougher league. For this reason, because the easier league was being run by a bunch of short-sighted folks who just did not know what they were doing. Nobody knows who the Southland Conference is. Most people know, even who are seriously who follow college basketball to any extent, they know who the Summit League is. It is a mid-major college conference. And it became a mid-major college conference because they also, in addition to regaining Oral Roberts, they also added North Dakota State and South Dakota State along the way when they made the move to Division I. And later the University of North Dakota. These schools became competitive fast. They have won most of the automatic berths to the NCAA dance tournament in their time in the Summit League. It is a mid-major conference. North Dakota State and South Dakota State have pulled off some serious upsets against major conference opponents. And Oral Roberts is there all because the Southland Conference decided that they had to placate McNeese State. You got to be asking, who's McNeese State? Well, it's, again, a small university in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which itself is a small city. Not an economic powerhouse by any means. It also gets hit by hurricanes a lot. That doesn't help. So trying to placate a school by moving the conference championships to their arena, not a good idea. And you upset your athletes too along the way. And so Oral Roberts headed off for the Summit League, which of course brought the oral jokes with them from the Southland to the Summit League. But nonetheless, they're having a bit of a tough sled in that league because it's a tougher conference. But they have no regrets over making that move. The Summit League does have some media deals, regional ones. So financially, it has been more beneficial to Oral to be in the Summit. Again, insert an inappropriate joke here. So bad organizations, bad companies make bad decisions. They make short-sighted decisions for instant gratification and instant revenue, and they make poor decisions, and that's why bad organizations remain bad. I've just given you a couple of rather personal examples in my case, but somebody could write an entire book about this. I'm already writing 2 books, so I'm not going to go there. Somebody could write an entire book about this, and if they have, let me know in the comments. I'm sure somebody has. I am just not thinking of it off the top of my head at the moment. So anyhow, that's it for now. We will see you all again. This is Friday. I'm filming live again. We'll see you tomorrow on Saturday. And once again, as always, peace out, homies.